Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this Superliminal Films, Superliminal Games YouTube video. Dan here.
Hi, I am not
Got
Dan.
Max. I was going to say, got Max with me, and we're going to walk you through a little bit of Standard Pauper because it's back.
Whoa.
We have not had this since. Did they do one for M20, or was it just War of the Spark? Has it been a year already?
Throne of Eldraine was the last time we got it.
Was that standard or was that historic?
That was historic.
Yeah, so Standard Pauper, I think last time we had it was War of the Spark.
Yeah, that may be correct.
Yeah, so it's been a while, and we're here to tell you that a lot of things have changed, but some things haven't.
Right.
Like Dimir is still the control deck.
I think so. I think you can get away with Azurius possibly, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Start in aggro because it's look, I'll be honest, it's FNM at home. You just need to record 2 wins to get your free cosmetics. A lot of people are just going to play for their 2 wins. They're not going to play for love of the format.
Exactly. And I think there's no level 0 deck right now. There's no more rats running around.
There's no rats. There's no petitioners, we hope.
Right. There's not. I went in. It's banned still. If you set your deck
to
good.
Pauper,
you're good.
Good.
Yeah. So I figure starting at aggro is the place most people are going to start for the reasons Dan just mentioned. So we're going to go through. I have 9 decks for us to look at, so we're going to move kind of fast. We're not going to go card for card on these, but we're just going to give you the basic idea and maybe point out some cool little cards that are in this deck that might be worth playing. Mono white, I have it built kind of like an aggro / auras kind of build right now. And I think that's a good place to start. There's a lot of really cheap evasive creatures like Fairy Godmother and Healer's Hawk. I think you can take advantage of them with some of the auras that are out right now. Sentinel's Eyes, Solid Footing, Knight's Pledge, Glaring Aegis, which I think is a pretty neat include because it taps a creature down, so it's going to let you get through their 1 flyer or whatever they have when you really need it. So I think that's pretty cool. Flutter Fox gets evasion. Basically everything in this deck is evasive, which is why I'm only running 2 Angelic Gift. But overall, I think the deck's very good. I think Karametra's Blessing is absurd in this deck. And I think overall, it's pretty much exactly what you're going to do is make a dude, make it big, and beat them down.
Make a dude, make it big, make it evasive, and beat them down.
Exactly. And you got Pious Wayfarer to pump them up. It's basic as it gets. I went 18 land because I really don't want to see more than about 3.
This is pretty similar to the Artisan deck that I used in last week's FNM at Home, which was a blue-white auras, like, Transcendent Envoy, put a, what is it, Startling Discovery, whatever the blue-white uncommon is that's insane.
Staggering Insight, I think?
Staggering Insight, something like that, Startling Discovery, Staggering Discovery, I don't know, whatever the fuck it's called. That one, like, I think I won 6 games in a row with that deck.
Sounds right.
This deck seems very similar where like if you can get a Transcendent Envoy down on 2 and just pants it up a bunch and go, you are going to hit your opponent very hard very quickly, especially with stuff like Sentinel's Eyes giving the vigilance. That vigilance is huge.
I agree with you. So let's jump over to the deck that I know Dan is very excited about and thinks is an early frontrunner in the format.
Say necessarily it's an early frontrunner, but it's 1,000% the deck that I will be playing when I play FNM at home. The mono red Blitz Prowess triggers when you cast non-creature spells deck.
Yeah, this deck looks pretty sick. It's been around basically since Pauper's been around. We've talked about a version of this deck. And if you don't believe us, you can go back and look at the old Pauper primers. And if you do, thanks. And it's still around. It is still very much a deck. Red's got some absurd removal right now. They just printed Fire Prophecy.
I mean, Fire Prophecy is one of the best best common removal spells they have printed in years.
This card is very convincing. The fact that you can move a dead land from your hand to the bottom of your library is very, very good. And you can see in this deck I'm running 20 land because we have ways to fiddle around with getting things out of the way. We have the Scry off of Burning Prophet. We have the Fire Prophecy to move things down. We have Scry 1 on Jaya's Greeting. We have a couple...
Raking Claws and Cycling.
Cycling on Raking Claws. We got a couple more expensive cards with the Pyroceratops and the Cosmotronic Wave. So I want to make sure that I'm hitting... Like, I probably want to top out at 4 lands in this build. and it seems pretty good. I mean, we have Brimrock Knight you can double spell with just off of one card, so that's a pretty nice way to use up 3 mana. There's a lot going on in this deck. It's very synergistic, and it can just kill you out of nowhere. It's very good.
Hell, even just non-spectacle casting a Skewer the Critics is still good.
Yes, yeah, it's a removal spell, or it's 3 to the face for lethal. This deck can send a lot of damage upstairs very quickly. We have a few creatures like Pyroceratops as well as the Fire Urchin that have trample, so keep that in mind when you're using Raking Claws to give double strike. Double strike and trample is the real deal.
Yep.
So there's a lot going on.
Also, just ending a game with Cosmotronic Wave, something I did in Limited a fair number of times, and it also seems to be fun in Pauper.
Exactly. You just can't kill him with your double striking trampler, then you just kill him with not blocking. Sounds good.
Yeah, doesn't matter how many creatures they have. Cosmotronic Wave is not a removal spell with the first sentence. It is a removal spell with the second sentence in that it removes your opponent from the game.
Falter's been a card for a long time.
Yeah, and it's really good, especially when casting that Falter makes all your creatures bigger.
Exactly. So let's jump over to blue, which is another aggro deck. This one I have designed around mostly flying, but there's also Of One Mind in here. So basically it's around discounted spells. It's around Gust of Wind, Of One Mind, and Winged Words. They're all spells that get discounts for some reason, so I tried to build towards all of those things. Of One Mind's tricky because so few of the humans are good for aggressive strategies in blue. Also, I found out...
So few of the humans are good.
Yeah, and I found this out also in red. Spoiler alert for when we get down to the Izzet deck. But there's just not a whole lot of good choices, so my humans are 4 Queen of Ice, 1 Passwall Adept, just to give me something to hopefully get a discount on Of One Mind. And the Queen of Ice is actually pretty good. You don't want to block it. It blocks well as a 2/3, and you have the advantage of you can use Rage of Winter to just tap something down, which is really, really nice. So other than that, it's flying cheapies that are trying to get through some value off Cloud Concealer to draw a card. Mantle of Tides, because you're going to be drawing so many cards in the deck with Gust of Wind, Cloud Concealer, Winged Words, Of One Mind. Mantle of Tides feels like a great include here to make your little guys a little bit beefier and just punch in for the last little bit of damage here. I have a couple Mystic Sanctuaries because there are quite a few sorceries in here, and being able to recast one of them or put them on top seems great. I'd love to put a discounted Winged Words or Of One Mind back on top and draw more cards.
I mean, that just sounds gross. I'll be honest.
Yeah, and I don't want a ton, and I definitely don't want them coming in tapped all the time, so I'm just running 2 instead of a full 4. Even though it's a monocolored deck, I feel like that possibility for less islands and more potential tapped lands could hurt you in the long run. I may fiddle with these numbers, but for now, I think 18 and 2 is the correct way to go.
I really don't have much to add there. I think it's a deck. I will add one quick thing. I think it's a deck that draw it in the right order, and your opponent's not even going to know what hit him.
Right. I totally agree. So, in a similar vein to blue and red, we'll look at Izzet next, because it's basically the red deck I built, but it's got a couple upgrades, I think. We'll see. It's got Of One Mind in it, because we get to run 4 Burning Prophet. I'm also running 4 Incendiary Oracle in this build because this is a good mana sink late. It exiles troublesome creatures. I don't know how much recursion there's going to be, but we know minimally you're going to have to deal with Witches' Cottages all over the place in this format. So,
yeah,
doesn't hurt to exile. There's also escape creatures. Those are real as well. So it doesn't hurt to have a way to exile those, and it's human, most importantly. It gives us 8 main deck humans to go with our Of One Mind, so we can draw cheap and keep gassing out with things like Opt, Shock, to trigger our Burning Prophets, Fire Urchins, and, of course, Spellgorger Weird. Pretty straightforward.
All sounds good, like, theoretically.
Yeah, again, I feel like it's a deck. You nailed it with the blue deck. When you draw the right hand, you're just going to completely mop the floor with your opponent. There are going to be other games where you struggle to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
So let's keep the fun rolling with the aggro. The last aggro deck I have for you all, the one that I'm probably the most excited to play with, is the Selesnya aggro deck that I have. And this deck is kind of spicy and barely Selesnya. So it's got For white cards, just Fairy Guidemother and Hero of the Pride. I don't think there's quite enough to run this deck mono green, and I looked pretty hard to try to force this into just mono green because I'd rather have the better mana. But I think the evasion off the Fairy Guidemother's adventure ability, the Gift of the Fae, is very powerful and can just close out a game. And there's so many things that incidentally target your creatures that Hero of the Pride is actually absurd if you have a few other creatures out. Things that target Rabid Bite, Ram Through to just mow your opponent's creatures down because it's a bully effect. You're just dealing their power to your opponent's creature's toughness. There's no interaction. That's a fight, so they're not dealing the damage back. It's just one-way street with Rabid Bite and Ram Through, which is really good.
Brushwag, the trample is amazing.
Yeah, same with the and the reason Setessan Tactics feels strong in this deck. It's giving a +1/+0 and trample, which works great with Ram Through.
Yeah, it just, get your Marrowleaf Rider or your Brushwag pretty big, ram through to deal a bunch of damage to their face and get a blocker out of their way, or ram through to deal a bunch of damage to their face to kill them, or get the card that's blocking your Trampler out of the way and then deal more damage to the face.
Yep,
ram through is a cool Magic card.
It is. I think that's kind of the secret. That's my secret unlock for this deck, is to kill somebody with Ram Through just with lethal.
Yeah.
So nothing flashy. Again, it's aggro, and I think it's going to be a contender for sure. The Halberd proved to be insane in Throne of Eldraine Limited in this kind of a deck, and I think that this is going to be no exception. I may have to fiddle. It may need another creature or two in here. I mean, not I'm talking another full creature. You may need 4 creatures and to go down on some of the other spells, but I think this is a good place to start your test. So now that we've talked about all that, we got to get into other stuff, right? We got mid-range, the middest of range. So I want to talk about the deck that was probably the first one that I built of all these mid-range decks. I was looking at it seems like I've built mono everything basically, but that wasn't the intent. I didn't go in just being like, hey, let me build a deck for every color. I just looked through the colors to see what jumped out at me, and luckily a lot of the decks you can kind of keep in one color, which is good because a lot of the Eldraine spell lands, if you will, are very good and a huge benefit of playing a mono-colored deck, which is cool, as opposed to, you still get the Gain a Life lands for 2 colors, which is a really nice piece, and we'll get into some of those
they're great in regular Pauper.
They are, and I think that's really nice, but I think these spell effect lands are really powerful. So this is an Aristocrat style deck. If you're not familiar with Aristocrats, the idea is you're sacrificing your creatures for value and trying to use that little micro edges of creatures dying to win you the game over the long haul. Kind of the key creature for this deck is the Lampad of Death's Vigil. It lets you sack a creature for each opponent to lose a life and you gain a life. So we can keep looping Sanitarium Skeletons. We can keep looping Durable Coil Bugs as the game goes long, because we're going to want this game to progress quite a while. And a card that I've been on about since Pauper started, I think, or close to it, once this card actually was in the Pauper metagame, that I think a lot of people sleep on, is Moodmark Painter. And this card is crazy. It gives menace and +X+O, where X is the number of creatures in your graveyard. So we can just give a creature basically unblockable out of nowhere in a deck like this, because there's so much removal in this kind of a deck, and there's so much inevitability over a long game that it can just be like, all right, this creature now has menace and +7/+0, so good luck.
Yeah, I like your inclusion of Cavern Whisperer too, because again, the menace as mentioned, but also just the making your opponent discard a card. We're already working on removing their creatures, we're working on draining their life total, now we're going to work on their hand, and I like how varied that is.
Yeah, I think I wanted to try this. I'm not a big fan of Burglar Rats in these style of decks, though a lot of people tend to lean on Burglar Rat.
I have definitely been hit by many a Burglar Rat. I've been burgled.
Yeah, I think this is just a little bit better. It comes down in a later turn where you can kind of make that card a little bit more valuable that they have to discard. It's going to make them make a painful noise a little bit more of the time. Because if they're aggro, especially by 4th turn, they're going to have run through most of their value and most of the cards in their hand to try to commit to the board. Hopefully you've been able to stop them behind a wall of bizarre 1/2s and 1/3s that sack for value. And then you can just play the Cavern. Why do I keep calling him a camel? I've been doing that consistently. If you watch our stream, I've been doing this the whole time. And I think also mutating on some of these cards we want to go to the graveyard anyway is fantastic. Like, I love to, you know what I mean, pop something onto a mutate, they have to deal with it, and now this creature's going to the graveyard and you're getting some kind of effect.
Yeah, especially if it's a coil bug or a
Scorpion.
Scorpion or an underworld charger. Like, go ahead, kill it.
Mm-hmm.
Skeleton, like, all of these things are either going to come back, or a serrated Scorpion is just going to drain our opponent.
Right.
And the drain is real. Like, if you can hit the opponent a couple of times and then just slowly drain them out.
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty good. I don't know how the Charger's going to go, but I feel like looking at the list, I needed a little bit more interaction out of the graveyard, and also looking at some of the starts you can get with this deck where you just go, like, Scorpion into Pauper or Coil Bug into Charger. It's like, you could just win some games off the fact that you're just going, like, decent 1-drop into a respectable 2 into a 3/3 on 3.
Yeah, and then, maybe make one of those smaller things a 4/4 with a Cavern Whisperer and make your opponent discard a card. That's the other thing about the mutate, in my opinion, is yes, you're paying to make them discard a card, but you're also upgrading one of your small little rinky dinks into a 4/4 that has menace.
Yep, I agree completely. So that is the Kratz deck, but we're not done with mid-range yet. Of course, we have more in store, and it only gets spicier, I promise.
Well, you do love Death Touch.
Yes, so this deck is a deck I've been rocking since Pauper existed, and that is full stop since this was a format. This is
the first time they gave us Pauper, you built Death Touch Ping.
Yes, I call it DTP, Death Touch Ping. So the concept is you have a creature with Death Touch, right? Like this Hired Poisoner. And then you use the cards we talked about earlier, Ram Through, Rabid Bite, I also band together in this deck. And you use that to shoot down all of their creatures. This deck is really good when the format is slow. This deck is really bad when the format is fast.
Yeah, that's true.
So I have a couple things in here to help us push through. It's another Halberd deck, though that's not really the reason it's in here. It's because if I need to make something a little bit bigger to try to win a game, I kind of have to make that concession. Boot Nipper's in here. He has lifelink potentially if we need it, which is also a nice little trick with something like a Rabid Bite. That all works. Again, this is a Moodmark Painter style deck, so we can use that to give one of our creatures menace and plus. Even if you're giving it a small menace and just enough they have to block, you can assign your damage however you want, so you're killing everything that gets blocked or that is blocking, which is really nice. But that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it's pretty, like, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's a pretty simple deck. It's just use the Death Touch to kill the creatures, then use your creatures to kill the opponent.
Yeah, it's a simple concept, but what's fun about the deck is the decisions you have to make when you play it. So give it a try. See what you think. The next deck is the one that I'm the most excited about, but I think is the worst.
This is your version of me in the mono red deck. This is the one where you're like, hell yeah.
Yeah, this is the cycling deck, and it's built around, in particular, basically this card, Drannith Stinger. So if you follow regular Great Pauper, a deck that has exploded in popularity is this Cycle Storm deck. And it's a really cool deck. Check it out if you get a chance. But there's nothing like Reaping the Graves in this particular format. So we can't do cool stuff where we get all of our cyclers back from the graveyard. But we can outvalue the opponent with Stinger and the Marmoset, as well as the Snare Tactician. It's going to take time, and it's going to take careful cycling, but we also have the Drannith Healer in here as a cycler, or if we need to gain life, he can. We also have a bunch of off-color cyclers, and like Vantasaur, who just hopefully we're not casting and just cycling. So the concept is to move through the deck as fast as possible. I have Thrill of Possibility and Shock in here as a concession to we may need to remove something, or we may need to filter further in the later parts of the game, but we are light on land in this deck. It's the lightest land count that I have. It's 16 lands in this deck. So
much of this stuff cycles for single colorless mana, you're fine, or single generic mana, you're fine.
Yes, and that was the point, is the Healer, the Stinger, the Development, the Gopher Blood, the Memory Leak, the Ambush, and the Vantasaur, all single cycle. So the deck is very much built around that one generic mana cycling. So I'm interested in the concept and seeing if it can work. My personal opinion is that there's not enough meat on the bone here, but I'm excited to try it anyway because this is really sweet, and cycling is one of my favorite abilities in Magic. So that covers us for mid-range. The last little piece here we have is control, and as Dan has said a bunch of times, Dimir tends to be the direction we go because there's just so much good. So the card that jumped out to me for control is Thirst for Meaning. This card is a heck of a lot of value. If you're familiar with Thirst for Knowledge is the same card except you have to discard an artifact to get the like benefit of drawing 2 cards at instant speed for 3. And Thirst for Meaning is really, really good, and it can put us really far ahead. And there happens to be right now a ton of enchantments that are very playable that we can use to pitch. I'm running So Tiny, Mogus's Favor, and Deadweight all as 1-drops. I'm a little lighter on those because Mogus's Favor we can use to escape and just kill off the really aggro creatures, and we've seen a lot of creatures susceptible to being killed because they have 1 toughness.
I mean, Deadweight, Mogus's Favor, and Mire's Grasp, which I know isn't a 1-drop, it's a 2-drop.
Yep.
Just are great sorcery speed removal spells in this format, and the fact that you can pitch them to a Thirst for Meaning and then shuffle them back in with a Devious Cover-Up is even better.
I agree, and that is exactly what we're trying to do. So I had a tough time, and I think that's why I mentioned earlier I think Azurius is also good, because I think Azurius also gives us some good enchantment effects. It gives you pacifism, it gives you the the binding, whatever it's called, Azurius's binding or whatever the heck it's called, the gold.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And there's some good stuff there. I like black because you also get things to like Toll the Invasion. You get Ill-Gotten Inheritance, as Dan pointed out. They are very powerful cards. I have Tamiyo's Epiphany in here to help get us back. We have Whisper Agent, though you could play that in just straight up blue-white as well, and you get Notion Rain for more card advantage. So
I feel like we're not playing enough Obnixilus's Cruelty in this deck.
It's a hard one to find because right now so if you count So Tiny as a removal spell, you have 7 1-drop removal spells. You go up to 10 with Mire's Grasp. It's like we're on a lot of removal already, and I agree with
anything
you.
That we can't anything we can't answer with one of those, anything with higher than 3 toughness, just so little has higher than 5 toughness.
Right. And that's the thing, and that's when you have to evaluate the format. You have to ask yourself, what is the big creature I'm trying to kill? I'm not convinced there's much more than 3. I guess like creatures that can increase, the Spellgorger Weird, the Pyroceratops are the scariest ones. Those are the ones that require the most, but I don't mind 2-for-1ing myself for their best card a lot of the time, especially because I can gain the advantage back so easily with this deck. I'm much more concerned getting killed by the little creatures that drop on 1, drop on 2, and try to murder me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the concession I made, but I agree with you. Obnixilus's Cruelty is a hell of a card. Like, I play that in the historic Pauper format on Arena because it is very, very powerful, and Exile, as we discussed, is bonkers.
Yep. I like the inclusion of Toll the Invasion. Toll the Invasion has outperformed every time I've seen it cast.
It's great. It's it affects the board, and it takes your opponent's best card out of their hand. I think it's very... In the mirror, you feel like a champion whenever you play it.
Especially if you get their IGI or like their Tamiyo's Epiphany or something like that.
Oh, you feel like a genius every time you get something good.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of what I wanted to run through for this. It's been a while, as Dan pointed out, since we had standard Pauper. There were too many cards to go over single contraptions and, that kind of stuff. But looking at them as a metagame, I think is a little bit easier to digest, though we're still running a bit long. So if you're still here, thanks for sticking with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I just have, one thing I want to add, that it's a deck that Max wasn't entirely certain about when we were talking before, but I completely think it's going to be played, and that is a mono black control, because we have Mire's Grasp, Mogus's Favor, Deadweight, Toll the Invasion, Obnixilus's Cruelty, and Ill-Gotten Inheritance.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the foundation of this Dimir deck we were just talking about slots right into that. You can have Whisper Agent as a creature. You were talking about putting it in Azurius. You can put it in mono black as well.
Mm-hmm.
There are another, few creatures that can just sort of shore up some stuff, and all you really need to do is lock it down until your IGIs can take over.
Yeah.
Because a couple of IGIs really do make a huge difference. I mean, a 4-life swing every turn is enormous, and if you can remove some of their more annoying creatures, it's not even a game anymore. And people like playing that because, again, it is, there's no level 0 deck, but there are there are a lot of level 1 decks that just make sense.
Oh yeah.
And when people are playing for 2 wins, they're going to want to just do the thing that makes sense. And I think that we can also probably expect a mono green Stompy deck of some sort, because there's always been one, whether or not it's good. Some people just like casting 6-drops.
Yeah, absolutely. They're gonna do the fast ramp and try to just kill everybody out as fast as they can. I don't think it's quite there. I looked at that too, but I agree with Dan. People are going to play it just because it doesn't quite fit. Doesn't mean that people aren't going to force it because that's their style.
1000%.
I have a cycling deck. Enough said, right?
I'm going to play mono red no matter whether or not it's good.
Yep. So until the next one, if you're not familiar with how we do this, every Thursday there's a new video on YouTube. If you hop over to our Twitch, it's twitch.tv/superliminalfilms. We stream Magic Arena, all different formats, every single Sunday. And oftentimes we stream more than that.
True. He's not wrong. www.superliminalfilms.com is where you can find anything else that we do. Bye, everybody.